A white female billionaire was racing to an important meeting when her $4 million hypercar suddenly started smoking and died right in the middle of the road. Stranded, surrounded by a crowd with their phone cameras pointed at her, panic began to set in until a homeless black man stepped out from the crowd and calmly said, "I can fix it." At first, she snapped at him, scoffed, completely certain he was just some random stranger trying to get close to her car. What she didn't know was that this man wasn't just actually capable of saving her car, he was the only person who could save the empire she had built. Before we dive in, where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me, and don't forget to hype and subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. Clara Vance hated running late, and today she was already 10 minutes behind schedule as her Nebula Phantom glided into Solis District, the part of Avalon City where all signals went to die. Everybody in town knew this was the black hole of reception. Solis District was notorious for its industrial interference, heavy machinery, data-secure facilities, entire blocks shielded from public networks. Out here you only got service if you were plugged into the private security booths scattered around the perimeter, and Clara was stranded at least a block away from the nearest one. Clara didn't have time to care about that. She had a multi-billion-dollar investor meeting waiting across town, and her hypercar, her prized, spotless, temperamental Nebula Phantom, was supposed to get her there in style. Instead, the moment she turned into the industrial corridor, the engine coughed, let out a strange metallic whine, and then a plume of blue-gray smoke curled out from the vents like the car was trying to exhale its last breath. Clara's stomach dropped. She had maybe 50 minutes to get to that meeting, and now her $4.5 million status symbol was choking in the middle of Solis District with zero cell signal and about 30 strangers already slowing their walk to film. "Perfect," she muttered, slamming the door behind her as she got out. "Just perfect." She tried calling roadside assistance anyway, waving her phone around like maybe a bar of signal was hiding somewhere above eye level. Nothing, not even an SOS flicker. The longer she stared at the smoke, the more heat crawled up her neck. She needed help, and she needed it now, preferably the kind that came with a non-disclosure agreement. Folks in Solis District weren't exactly known for minding their own business. That's when she heard a voice behind her. "Ma'am, I wouldn't stand too close to that if I were you." She turned, already irritated, already ready to shut down whatever nonsense was coming her way. The man standing a few steps back was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in layers that didn't match: 3-year-old hoodie, thrift store jacket, jeans that had seen more concrete than daylight. His beard was patchy, his hair tied back, and his eyes sharp in a way that didn't fit the rest of him. A homeless guy. Great, exactly the kind of attention she did not need going viral right now. "I'm fine," Clara snapped, waving him off without actually looking him in the eye. "Please step back." But the man didn't budge. He tilted his head, listening in a way that felt strangely technical, like he was tuning into the engine instead of her tone. "You hear that?" he asked, pointing toward the hood. "That rattling under the smoke, that's not a pretty sound." "Sir," she said, jaw tightening, "I don't need commentary. I need a tow truck." "Yeah, well," he said, shrugging lightly, "you're not getting one out here. Not for a while anyway." Clara tried her phone again just to prove, mostly to herself, that something would work if she pushed hard enough. Still nothing. The man nodded at her dead screen. "Told you, Solis is a signal sinkhole." "Thanks," she muttered. "I got that part." The guy took a small step forward, hands lifted like he didn't want any trouble. "Okay, look," he said, in a calm, almost apologetic tone, "but your cooling system's in trouble. That smoke color, that's the secondary loop running hot, real hot." Clara blinked at him, disbelief shifting into irritation. "I'm sorry, what? Secondary loop?" he repeated, like this was a normal sidewalk chat. "Probably a microfracture. You don't want that turning into a full breach." This time she looked him directly in the face. His tone wasn't mocking. His eyes weren't wandering. He was speaking, like he knew what he was talking about, like he'd done this before. But that made no sense. Clara crossed her arms, refusing to take the bait. "Sir, you don't know anything about this car." "I know what a dying coolant chamber sounds like," he said, "and yours is screaming." Clara opened her mouth to shut him down again, but a louder hiss came from the engine, a sharp, pressurized whine that made even the bystanders flinch. The man winced. "Yep, there it is. The part where it starts yelling for help." Clara felt her pulse hammer. She didn't trust him, she didn't trust this place, and she definitely didn't trust the smoke billowing out of her $1 million toy. And then, because Solis District loved drama, someone in the crowd shouted, "Hey lady, your car's gonna blow." Clara spun toward them. "It's not going to." "It might," the man cut in gently, nodding at the engine. "Depends how lucky you feel today." She wheeled back to him, stunned at the confidence in his voice. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Sure," he said, with a soft lopsided grin, "but I'm the only one out here who even tried to tell you what's happening." He stepped back again to give her space, but his eyes stayed on the engine with the focus of someone watching a countdown. And for the first time since the car died, Clara felt something she really didn't want to feel: doubt. Not doubt in him, doubt in her own options. She had a dead car, a dead phone, a street full of strangers live streaming her meltdown, and one man, one homeless man, talking like he had the blueprint to the Nebula Phantom memorized. She stole one more glance at him. He didn't look threatening. He didn't look impressed by her money or her car. He just looked concerned, calm, certain, and somehow that made her even more nervous. He nodded once, almost to himself, like he'd already accepted whatever choice she'd make. "Name's Marcus, by the way," he said, backing up a step. "Just figured I'd say something before that pretty little engine of yours cooks itself alive." Clara didn't answer. She couldn't, because for the first time since the engine stalled, she heard it too, the strange off-tempo rattle under the smoke. Something was very, very wrong. And somehow, unbelievably, the only person who seemed to know what was happening was the man she'd just tried to push away. The thing about Marcus Reed was that nobody looking at him now would ever guess who he used to be. Most people on the street glanced at his worn jacket, the scuffed sneakers, the tired eyes that had seen too much, and filed him away in that mental drawer labeled, "Not my problem." Clara had nearly done the same just minutes earlier, barely giving him more than a passing look. What she didn't know, what almost no one in Avalon City knew, or even bothered to imagine, was that Marcus had once been the kind of person people begged to get in a room with. Before Solis District sidewalks became his address, Marcus had lived and worked in labs so bright and so impossibly high-tech, they didn't even allow coffee inside, for fear a single spill could ruin millions of credits worth of equipment. Back then, Stellar Lab called him a prodigy, Novatech Industries called him a critical asset, and the engineers at both companies quietly, almost reverently, called him the guy you don't argue with when it comes to heat. He wasn't bragging, he was simply built different. Marcus didn't just read thermodynamic equations, he heard them. Engines spoke to him the way instruments speak to musicians. If something vibrated wrong, he knew instantly. If a chamber ran hot, he could point to the exact bolt, gasket, or weld causing it. His talent didn't come from privilege or pedigree. It came from afternoons watching his mom fix busted air conditioners during brutal Memphis summers, learning that every system told a story if you listened hard enough. That listening turned into 3 engineering degrees, a scholarship to Stellar Labs' elite research program, and eventually the assignment that changed everything. The NX 552 cooling architecture, the backbone of next-generation quantum engines, including the one humming inside Clara's Nebula Phantom. Marcus had been the one who designed the very first prototype loop, the one who warned the team that the stress point at the tertiary junction needed reinforcement, the one who flagged, months in advance, the exact microfracture pattern that was now slowly killing Clara's engine. But warnings don't matter when executives want deadlines met more than they want engineers heard. Pressure can turn some people into diamonds, yes, but sometimes it just creates scapegoats. The day everything fell apart, Marcus wasn't even in the room. Novatech had pushed a live test 20 hours early. They bypassed the safe sequence he wrote. They used a cheaper alloy because procurement wanted it fast and good enough. And when the prototype ruptured, sending a shockwave through half the test chamber and triggering 3 separate emergency shutdowns, someone needed to take the blame immediately. A junior tech mentioned Marcus's old memo about pressure concerns. Someone else twisted the wording into something it wasn't. By the time Marcus got to the office, the narrative was already locked in. He was the problem. Not the shortcuts, not the cost-cutting. Him. Unreliable. Impulsive. Not a cultural fit. Words that slid out smoother because he was black. Words that stuck harder because he wasn't connected. Words that closed doors faster than truth could pry them back open. Within a week, his contract evaporated. Within a month, so did his savings. And within a year, all the companies that once fought to hire him acted like they'd never seen his resume. Avalon City didn't push him down, it simply didn't care whether he ever got back up. Now he slept behind the old machine shop on the north end of Solis District, where the constant hum of industrial engines was the closest thing to a lullaby he needed. Every morning he folded his tarp with almost military precision, washed up at the public restroom, and walked to the Avalon Library the moment it opened, because genius doesn't switch off just because society does. He read every engineering journal the city tossed out. He taught science to kids at the West Side shelter 3 nights a week, and he kept listening, always listening to the engines passing through Solis District. Which was why, earlier that morning, before he even rounded the corner, he recognized the sound of Clara's Nebula Phantom. A Nebula Phantom had a very particular rhythm, smooth, controlled, balanced like a perfectly engineered heartbeat. But this one carried an unfamiliar hitch, a slight drag in the quantum cooling pulse he had heard only once before, years ago, during that infamous rush test. He stopped walking, tilted his head, listened again. Somebody didn't reinforce the tertiary junction. Again, he whispered to himself. It should have been someone else's problem. But when the second pulse hit his ears, sharper, weaker, almost pleading, Marcus knew exactly what came next if no one intervened, and he couldn't stand by and let another system fail when he knew precisely how to save it, even if the person he was about to help might look at him like he didn't belong anywhere near her pristine car. Even if stepping in meant brushing up against the world that had thrown him out without looking back. He walked toward the smoke anyway, because that's who Marcus Reed was, the man who still fixed things, even after nobody bothered fixing anything for him. By the time Clara forced herself to stop staring at Marcus like he just crawled out of a conspiracy thread, the security team from the Solis District booth was already hurrying over. 2 guards, broad shoulders, clipped voices, fluorescent badges that made them look more official than they actually were. The taller one spoke first, not even pretending to hide the irritation in his tone. "Ma'am, you need to step back, sir, move away from the vehicle." Marcus lifted his hands, palms open, voice steady. "I'm not touching it, I'm just telling her what's happening." The guard snorted. "Yeah, and what's happening?" "Secondary loop leak," Marcus replied calmly, nodding toward the hood. "Probably a microfracture at the junction. She's got, maybe." He squinted, listening again to the soft hiss beneath the smoke. 45 minutes before permanent damage. Clara scoffed out of reflex, but something inside her chest tightened anyway. 45 minutes. Her investor meeting flashed across her mind like a warning. "Right," the guard muttered, rolling his eyes. "You run diagnostics in your sleep, huh?" Marcus offered a tiny shrug, as if the sarcasm didn't even register. "Used to." The shorter guard stepped between them, sizing Marcus up the way people do when they've already decided who you are. "ID," he said curtly. "Let's see it." Marcus pulled out the only identification he had left, his shelter card. The guard took one look and handed it back like it was contaminated. "No current address, no employer on file, prior incident at Novatech," he said to Clara. "Ma'am, he needs to leave the area, could be trying to tamper with proprietary tech." Clara crossed her arms defensively, grateful to have authority nearby even if she wasn't entirely sure they were right. "I told him to step back," she said. "He's making some wild claims about knowing my engine." Marcus let out a soft, tired exhale, the kind that said he'd lived this scene before, 100 versions of it. "Look," he said, glancing at the smoking car again, "you don't have to believe me. But that sound." A sharp metallic whine cut through the air as if on cue. Marcus raised his eyebrows slightly. "That sound means your chamber's hitting the first destabilization point." Clara hated the timing, hated that the noise lined up perfectly with exactly what he said, hated that her stomach dropped again. "You don't know this car," she insisted, voice thinner than she meant. "This model has technology so classified most technicians can't even look at the schematics without clearance." Marcus nodded once, like he respected her point, then casually dropped a bomb. "Yeah, NX 552 architecture. Quantum-cooled tertiary chamber, stress point on the south junction unless you reinforced it." The guards froze. Clara blinked. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. How do you know that code?" "I wrote about that flaw years ago," Marcus said simply. "Literally wrote the memo." The taller guard stepped forward, jaw tight. Sir, that's enough. Step away, now. Marcus took a slow breath, the kind of breath you take when you know pushing back won't change anything. He raised his hands higher, backing up 2 steps. Okay, I'm going. He turned away, the crowd murmuring, the cameras still pointed, the smoke still twisting upward. Clara watched him walk like he'd rehearsed leaving before, walk like someone used to being dismissed. And then the engine gave another violent rattle, sharper, louder, a sound that hit her spine. Marcus stopped mid-step, didn't turn, didn't speak, just listened. Then he glanced over his shoulder, eyebrows knitting. She hits that frequency again, he said quietly. You'll lose containment. This time, he wasn't selling anything. No confidence trick, no big theatrics, just a warning delivered with the composure of someone who genuinely didn't want anything bad to happen. Clara swallowed hard. Containment of what? Heat, he said, pressure, and about 9 very expensive components you don't want melting together. The guard snapped again, impatient. Move along, man, we've got it. Marcus looked at him, then back at Clara. His voice softened. I know you don't trust me, you don't have to, but your tow truck won't get here for 2 hours, and your car hasn't got 40 minutes left. Clara felt something shift inside her, annoyance turning into uncertainty, uncertainty turning into fear, fear turning into something she hated to admit. She needed help. But the part she wasn't ready to say out loud was the one that mattered most. The only person who seemed to know what her car was actually doing was the man everyone was trying to push away. And that somehow made the whole situation feel even more unstable than the engine currently rattling under the hood. Clara didn't want to admit it out loud, not to the guards, not to Marcus, not even to herself, but something in her gut was shifting. The engine wasn't just malfunctioning, it was warning her. The sound coming from under the Nebula Phantom's hood wasn't the normal kind of ugly noise you get when you ignore an oil light. It was sharp, uneven, layered, almost like the car was speaking in a language only engineers understood. And unfortunately, the only person who seemed to understand that language was the one man nobody here trusted. The taller guard adjusted his vest, planting himself between Clara and Marcus like he was protecting royalty from a street distraction. Ma'am, we'll handle it, he said firmly. Let the manufacturers send their people. Protocol exists for a reason. Marcus raised an eyebrow at that, but didn't say a word. He kept his hands up, palms open in a fine play it your way posture. His eyes, though, stayed on the car, scanning the vents, the smoke, the color of the vapor like he was reading a story Clara didn't have access to. She hated how calm he looked, hated that some small part of her wanted him to explain more. You said there's a micro-fracture, Clara finally said, her voice dropping just enough that only the guards and Marcus could hear. Marcus nodded once, not dramatic, not smug, just matter of fact. Yeah, your tertiary chamber's taking in coolant it shouldn't. That's what that blue-gray smoke is telling you. The shorter guard scoffed. And you know this because, what, you're the car whisperer? Marcus shrugged lightly. I'm good at listening. The guard muttered something under his breath that definitely wasn't a compliment. Clara clenched her jaw. She didn't want this conversation. She wanted her car fixed, her meeting made, her reputation intact. Yet the rattle under the hood refused to give her any sense of control. She tried the booth phone again. The roadside team repeated the same answer. 2 hours, even with priority status. She hung up and stared at the smoking car. 2 hours was not an option. If the damage was as severe as Marcus claimed, she wouldn't even have a car left to tow. When she turned back toward him, she caught something strange, something out of place. Marcus wasn't just watching the engine, he was predicting the rhythm of its failure in his head. His eyes weren't desperate, or opportunistic, or pleading the way she expected from someone in his situation. They were calculating, focused, the same way her lead engineers looked when they were troubleshooting code. It unsettled her more than the smoke. All right, Clara said, forcing authority back into her voice. Explain one thing to me. How did you know that system code? Marcus hesitated, not because he didn't know the answer, but because he was deciding how much truth she could handle. Then he said it. I wrote the original memo on that failure point. The NX 552 flaw report, that was me. The guards stiffened. Clara blinked twice. Impossible, she said. That memo was internal. Restricted access. You'd need clearance levels you don't have. She caught herself, the implication hanging in the air. Any more? Marcus corrected gently. Then he added quietly, you don't forget the things you build, even when the people you built them for forget you. The older guard shot Clara a look, one part concern, one part suspicion, like he was waiting for her to give the order to escort Marcus as far away as possible. Ma'am, someone feeding you confidential document numbers is a red flag, could be corporate theft. Marcus rolled his eyes just a little. Yeah, I'm out here stealing secrets using a shelter ID and a backpack full of granola bars, makes total sense. The guard bristled. Watch it. But Clara, she wasn't listening to their argument anymore. She was listening to the engine. The new sound coming from inside was quieter but deeper, like something was straining. She couldn't ignore it. Tell me the worst-case scenario, she said, finally turning fully toward Marcus. He studied her with the expression of someone who'd been waiting for that opening. Worst case, the breach grows, coolant floods the tertiary chamber, the quantum bearings overheat. You lose pressure stabilization. You're looking at, maybe 900 grand in parts and 3 months without a vehicle. Clara felt her jaw clench. That was worse than she was prepared for. Much worse. The shorter guard crossed his arms. Even if he's right, we can't let some random guy tear open the hood of a proprietary hypercar. Marcus shrugged. Then don't let me tear anything open. Let me show you what's already happening. The engine's doing the talking. I'm just translating. The engine hissed again, louder this time, almost like it wanted to prove him right. Clara she hated coincidences when they piled up like this. She walked closer to the hood, and watched the smoke shift. The color wasn't random, it was changing shades, swirling thicker in the same rhythm as the noise Marcus reacted to earlier. She wasn't an engineer, but she wasn't stupid. Something was wrong, and Marcus wasn't guessing. He was anticipating. Her mind raced. If she let him near the engine, and he messed up, she'd be liable for a security breach. If she didn't let him near it, and he was right, she'd watch her hypercar die on the side of the street like a very expensive casualty. She closed her eyes for half a second, just long enough to admit silently to herself, I need more than luck. I need information. All right, Clara said slowly, if you had the proper equipment, hypothetically, what exactly would you do? Marcus didn't miss the shift. His tone brightened a fraction, not cocky, just relieved she was talking like someone who actually wanted to solve the problem. I'd isolate the section of the loop, vent the contaminated coolant, reinforce the microfracture, and rebalance pressure. Takes about 20 minutes. The tall guard barked a laugh. With what tools? A spoon and a prayer. Marcus pointed at Clara's emergency kit, tucked in the back trunk. She's got half the gear already. And the rest, he pointed at the convenience store across the street. 2 items inside. Pencil lead, and a disposable mask. The guard stared. A pencil, Marcus nodded. A very specific one. The guard rubbed his temples like he was trying not to explode. Ma'am, this guy's messing with you. But Clara wasn't listening to him anymore. She was watching Marcus's face, how relaxed he looked when he said the plan, how unbothered he seemed by the guard's skepticism. He didn't look like a desperate man trying to impress anyone. He looked like someone who had done this before, someone who had stood in a lab explaining failures to people who ignored him. She suddenly realized something. Marcus didn't sound like a homeless man pretending to know engineering. He sounded like an engineer pretending not to care that nobody listened. The thought hit harder than she expected. Show me, Clara said. Marcus blinked. Show you what? Not the repair. Show me what's happening inside. Her voice had shifted, less defensive, more curious, but still guarded. Marcus stepped forward slowly, careful not to startle the guards. He pointed through the hood vents, tracing specific angles with his finger in the air. Right there, he said. That section. That's where the secondary and tertiary systems meet. That line of smoke, wrong density, means coolant's leaking through a crack about the width of a hair. He pointed again. The sound you're hearing is the chamber compensating. It'll keep trying until it can't. The tall guard's expression faltered, just a flicker, but Clara caught it. Marcus continued, your car isn't dying yet, but it's not getting better on its own. It's like ignoring a fever and hoping it goes away. Clara's throat tightened. She couldn't deny it anymore. He knew what he was talking about, too well.
The guard, sensing Clara's hesitation, stepped in. "Ma'am, for your safety, we need to secure the vehicle and wait for authorized personnel." Marcus took a step back, resigned, hands already rising in surrender. "It's your call," he said. "I'm not forcing it, just saying, if you wait, it'll be toast." And then the engine let out a deep grinding groan, a sound that didn't even pretend to be subtle. Clara's eyes widened. Marcus didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The sound said it for him. She spun to the guards. "Check his background again." "We already did. Check deeper," she snapped. Annoyed, the tall guard radioed the booth. A long minute passed. Another. The engine hissed again. Then the booth operator's voice crackled back. "Hey boss, we just got something weird. There's a flagged internal file from Stellar Lab tied to his name. Some kind of technical memo." Marcus didn't move. The guards did. Clara felt the shift ripple through the air. "Pull the file," she said. "We can't," the operator replied. "It's locked under a restricted clearance, but his name is definitely attached." The guard looked at Marcus as if truly seeing him for the first time. Clara's heartbeat quickened. She whispered, almost to herself, "What the hell kind of homeless man has a restricted Stellar Lab memo under his name?" Marcus finally shrugged. "A tired one." The guard straightened. "Ma'am, maybe we should hear him out." The crowd leaned in. Phones stopped moving. Even the engine seemed to quiet as if waiting for her next move. Clara exhaled slowly, her decision chasing itself to the surface. "All right," she said, meeting Marcus's eyes. "Tell me exactly what you need." And for the first time since the car broke down, the fear in her chest eased, just a little. Because for the first time she wasn't guessing, she was choosing. Marcus nodded once, the faintest smile touching the corner of his mouth. He knew this was the moment everything would change. And Clara suspected it might change more than just her car. Clara didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until the words slipped out of her mouth. "Tell me exactly what you need." For a second Marcus didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. He was waiting, making sure she actually meant it, making sure the guards wouldn't swarm him the second he stepped forward. When he finally lowered his hands and took one cautious step closer, the tall guard immediately stiffened. "Ma'am," he said, voice sharp, "I strongly advise against this." "Noted," Clara replied without taking her eyes off Marcus. "But unless any of you happen to be hiding a degree in quantum thermal systems, he's the only one with answers right now." The shorter guard muttered something like, "This is insane," but even he didn't sound fully convinced anymore. The memo from the booth had rattled him. Clara could see it on his face. Whatever they found had cut right through the assumption that Marcus was just another stranger who wandered too close to expensive machinery. Marcus crouched near the front of the car, not touching, just observing, then pointed toward the emergency release latch beneath the hood. "I'll need access," he said. "And what else?" Clara asked. "Emergency kit, flashlight, space to work, and somebody to grab a specific pencil from that store." He nodded toward the convenience shop across the street, a graphite-heavy one.
The tall guard scoffed. "You hear yourself, a pencil. This is ridiculous." Marcus glanced up, deadpan. "Yeah, well, so is pretending that engine noise means everything's fine." He pointed at the car just as it let out another ugly groan, the kind that made the whole crowd flinch. "See, she agrees with me." Even Clara couldn't stop the small exhale that slipped from her. He was irritatingly calm. Too calm to be lying. Too calm to be guessing. Still, she wasn't ready to give him full access yet. Not without something solid, something undeniable. "Before I let you touch anything," she said carefully, "I need to know exactly who you are. Not a story, not a hunch, proof." Marcus didn't look offended, he simply nodded like he'd expected that line of questioning since the minute he stepped forward. "Fine," he said. "Call Hannah." The name meant nothing to the crowd, but the guards looked at each other like he'd just spoken a password. Clara narrowed her eyes. "Hannah? Who?" "Dr. Hannah Lowell," he said. "Stellar Lab, head of thermal systems." That hit Clara right between the ribs. She knew the name. Everybody in the industry did. Dr. Hannah Lowell wasn't just an expert. She was the expert. If someone like her vouched for a person, that was as good as a federal endorsement. The tall guard shook his head instantly. "Ma'am, we can't just call, get me the number," Clara ordered. "We don't have authorization." "I do," she snapped. Because Vance Dynamics co-financed half the research she's conducting this year. So unless you plan to physically restrain me, step aside. The guard stepped aside. Clara turned to the booth. Patch me through. The booth operator hesitated. Ma'am, she's in a meeting. She'll take this one, Clara said. Trust me. The operator patched her through. The line rang once, twice, then clicked. A crisp, focused voice answered, "This is Dr. Lowell." Clara straightened unconsciously. "Dr. Lowell, this is Clara Vance from Vance Dynamics. Apologies for the intrusion, but I have a situation with a Nebula Phantom and a potential consultant who says he knows you." "A consultant?" Hannah repeated, confused. "Who?" Clara glanced at Marcus. He met her eyes, only the slightest flicker of nerves showing. "His name is Marcus Reed." Everything on the line went silent. Not static, not background noise. Silence. Then Hannah exhaled sharply, so sharply the guards turned instinctively, as if something physical had struck the call. "Is he there?" she demanded. Clara blinked. "Yes, he's put me on speaker." Clara tapped the button and held the receiver between them. "Marcus?" Hannah said, her voice suddenly softer in a way Clara had never heard from her before. Marcus cleared his throat. "Hey Doc, where the hell have you been?" she said. Not angry, just stunned. "Do you know how long we tried to find you? You vanished." "I didn't vanish," Marcus said quietly, "just fell through the cracks." Clara stared at him. She had expected Hannah to dismiss him, to laugh, to say she'd never heard of him. She did not expect this. On the phone, Hannah's tone shifted, turning sharp, directed at Clara. "Clara, do you understand who you have standing in front of you?" "I don't think I do," Clara admitted. "Marcus Reed is the single best thermal engineer I have ever met," Hannah said. "The NX 552 memo your security flagged. He wrote it. The reinforcement fix your car's system is supposed to use. That came from his analysis. Half the innovations the auto division licensed from us. Marcus built the prototypes." The guards stared at him. The crowd murmured. Clara felt her chest tighten. Marcus kept his eyes on the ground. Hannah wasn't done. "If he says your Phantom has a microfracture, you listen to him. If he says he can fix it, let him. Frankly, he's more qualified than the entire emergency team you're waiting on." Clara swallowed hard. She didn't want to look stunned, but her face wasn't cooperating. "Then, why isn't he working with you now?" Hannah hesitated. For the first time since the call began, there was something like shame in her voice. "Because Novatech buried him, and we didn't pull him out fast enough." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, as if bracing himself. Clara felt a warmth she didn't expect. Anger. Not at Marcus. At whatever process, whatever politics, whatever quiet cruelty had taken someone this brilliant and pushed him straight onto the streets. She didn't know the full story yet, but she could see its outline now, and she hated it. Hannah continued. "Clara, don't waste time. Your car doesn't have much left. Let him work." Clara nodded slowly, even though Hannah couldn't see her. "All right. And Clara," Hannah added. "Yes. Be good to him. He deserves better than what he got." Clara ended the call, her hand lingering on the phone for a moment longer than necessary. When she turned back to Marcus, the air around them had shifted completely. He wasn't the stranger the guards wanted to chase off. He wasn't the potential threat. He wasn't even just a talented engineer. He was the man who'd been telling the truth the entire time. The tall guard cleared his throat, suddenly uncomfortable. "Ah, Mr. Reed. Sorry about earlier." Marcus offered a tiny smile. "Don't sweat it. You weren't wrong to be cautious." "Still," the guard said, scratching the back of his neck, "I misread the situation. You and half the planet," Marcus replied lightly. The crowd, previously whispering behind their screens, was now fully invested. Some were filming more carefully, less like gawkers and more like people watching something important unfold. Clara stepped closer to him. Not too close, just enough. "You said you needed a specific pencil," she asked. "Yeah," Marcus said with a nod. "Graphite dense soft core, 8B, and the emergency kit." Clara motioned to the short guard. "Go get the pencil." He hesitated. "From the convenience store." "Yes," she said in a tone that tolerated no debate. The guard jogged off. Clara looked back at Marcus. Why didn't you say all of that earlier? About who you were? He shrugged, palms open. People don't usually believe it, and sometimes it's easier just not to explain. There was no self-pity in his voice. Just honesty, plain and quiet. Clara studied him for a long second before nodding. Well, I believe you now. Marcus chuckled. Bit late, but I'll take it. She almost smiled. Almost. Marcus, she said gently, can you really fix this car? I can fix a lot of things, he said. Your car just happens to be one of them. The guard from the store returned with a small paper bag. He handed it to Marcus like a peace offering. Got the pencil you wanted. Marcus peeked inside. Perfect. Clara took a breath, squared her shoulders and stepped aside like someone ready to let an expert work. All right, she said, let's save my car. For the first time since this entire disaster started, Marcus looked energized. And for the first time Clara realized something strange about herself. She wasn't nervous anymore. She was hopeful. Marcus stepped toward the Nebula Phantom like a surgeon approaching the table, and the crowd reacted as if someone had suddenly turned the volume dial down on the entire block. Conversations hushed. Camera phones steadied. Even the smoke drifting from the vents seemed to thin out, as if the car itself had stopped to pay attention. Clara stood beside him, arms folded tightly, not in defiance this time, but in a tense, reluctant trust. The guards hovered behind her, unsure whether they were supposed to supervise or apologize again. Nobody dared interrupt the strange sense of anticipation hanging over the street. Marcus knelt beside the front panel, the emergency kit already open next to him. He spread out the tools with the kind of efficiency that didn't need second guessing. Flashlight, sealant cartridge, mini vent hose, micro driver, thermal pad, 2 clamps, and the pencil the guard had retrieved from the convenience store across the street. He picked up the pencil first, rolling it between his fingers. Good choice, he murmured to the guard, who blinked awkwardly, unsure if he was being complimented or teased. Marcus cracked a small smile, just enough to ease the tension, not enough to break focus. Then he clicked on the flashlight, and looked up at Clara. Last chance to change your mind, he said. Not happening, she replied, though her voice trembled just slightly. Let's do this. Marcus nodded, angled the flashlight toward the hood vents, and finally released the access latch. The hood lifted with a faint hydraulic hiss. The exposed engine gleamed like a piece of alien technology, intricate spirals of alloy and quantum coils reflecting the street lights. Under any other circumstance, the sight would have drawn gasps of admiration. Tonight, it only drew silence. Marcus leaned forward, inhaled carefully, and whispered, "Yep, there she is." Clara stepped closer. "What?" "Coolant signature," he said. "Smells sharp. Wrong chamber's cooking it." The taller guard grimaced. "You can smell coolant displacement, only the expensive stuff," Marcus answered. He reached inside the engine, careful not to touch sensitive lines. His fingertips hovered over each component, following the warmth, reading vibration through the air like a sculptor reading the grain of stone. Then he stopped at a narrow seam, where a tiny shimmer of vapor escaped in rhythmic pulses. "Found it," he said. "Cracks right where I expected." Clara leaned in. "That tiny, that's the thing causing all this." "That tiny," Marcus confirmed. "Quantum pressure systems don't mess around. A hairline fracture is all it takes." The engine whined again, the sound sharper than before. Marcus pressed his lips together. "And she's not happy about being ignored." The crowd shifted uneasily. Marcus cleared his throat, rolling his shoulders once to loosen them. "All right," he said, with steady focus, "time to get to work." He took the pencil, snapped it cleanly in half, and used his thumb to slide the soft graphite core free from the wooden shell. The guards winced as if he'd just broken something valuable. Clara frowned. "I'm still trying to understand why a hypercar needs a pencil." Marcus grinned faintly. "Technically it needs graphite. The pencil is just cheaper." He crushed the graphite between 2 pieces of the thermal pad, grinding it until it became a silky dark powder. Then he mixed it with the emergency sealant, turning the paste into a thick metallic slurry that shimmered like liquid steel. Clara watched closely. "And that fixes the fracture, temporarily," Marcus said. "Think of it like a patch." Not pretty but strong enough to survive. How long does it hold? 3 weeks, Marcus answered. Unless you drive like a maniac. Clara let out the smallest, most embarrassed cough. I drive responsibly. Marcus raised one eyebrow without looking up. Sure you do. The crowd laughed nervously. Marcus didn't. He was already reaching deeper into the engine, guiding the flashlight with his shoulder as he cleaned the area around the crack. His hands worked with a calm precision that contradicted the visible tension tightening every muscle in Clara's posture. Then the engine's diagnostic panel chimed. Critical threshold approaching. The sound sliced through the street. Phones lifted. The energy shifted. Clara stiffened. What does that mean? It means we're running out of time, Marcus said, not pausing. She's minutes from shutting down entirely. How many minutes? The tall guard asked. Marcus tilted his head, listening to the engine's pulse. Maybe 6, maybe less. The crowd gasped. Someone muttered, we're gonna watch a $4 million meltdown. Clara whipped toward them, anger flaring, but Marcus beat her to it. Nobody's melting anything, he said, voice firm, steady. Long as nobody distracts me. He took a long breath, exhaled slowly, and slid his hand deeper into the engine chamber. His fingertips trembled for just a fraction of a second, not from fear, but from precision. He wasn't patching a pipe, he was stabilizing a quantum-cooled system with a homemade paste and sheer nerve. Clara's heart hammered in her chest. The guards weren't breathing normally anymore. The crowd had stopped recording out of instinct, terrified they might disrupt something cosmic. Okay, Marcus murmured, pressure is rising. Hold on, hold on. He positioned the composite mixture over the fracture, pressing it gently with a thermal pad. The sealant hissed as it reacted to the superheated alloy. A line of steam curled upward. The engine protested with a violent shudder. Clara flinched. Is that supposed to happen? Yep, Marcus said calmly. Means she's fighting me. Cars have egos too. He continued pressing the seal into the fracture, molding it like clay over a hairline of danger. The graphite shimmered, reacting as Marcus predicted, fusing to the alloy like it belonged there. The diagnostic panel chimed again. 2 minutes to critical failure. The crowd nearly panicked. Marcus didn't blink. Almost there, he murmured. Don't freak out at me, girl. I'm helping you. The car let out a small metallic screech, the kind that makes people cover their ears. Clara stepped back instinctively but forced herself to stop. She refused to interrupt him now, not when the stakes felt like they were touching the sky. Marcus slowly pulled his hand out. Okay, crack sealed. Now I need to vent it. He grabbed the mini vent hose from the emergency kit, attached it to a tiny port on the engine, and twisted. A puff of bright iridescent fluid sprayed out, glowing faintly under the streetlights like something harvested from a sci-fi lab. That's the nano coolant, Clara whispered. About 20 grand worth, Marcus replied. We'll save most of it. He vented the contaminated portion carefully, catching it in a small container from the kit. Every motion was deliberate, steady, controlled, like he'd been doing this his whole life. And in a way he had. He wiped his hands on the edge of his jacket, and reached for the reserve coolant in the kit. Last part, he said. We refill with standard coolant. Won't give you full power, but it'll keep her alive. Clara nodded, breath shallow. The refill went quickly but the tension didn't ease. Not yet. Marcus tapped the engine casing twice. All right, he said. Moment of truth. Clara stared at the start button inside the car like it was a detonator. What do I? Start the engine, Marcus said. What if Clara? He said gently. Start it. She swallowed, climbed into the driver's seat, and pressed the ignition. The engine whined for half a second, an agonizing, fragile, uncertain half-second, before settling into a smooth, steady hum that washed over the street like a wave of relief. No rattling, no smoke, no warning lights, just life. The crowd erupted. Cheers bounced off the metal walls of Solis District. Someone yelled, he saved it. Someone else shouted, holy hell. The guards exchanged looks of disbelief. Clara stepped out of the car, stunned, speechless. For the first time since the breakdown, she felt oxygen return to her lungs. Marcus simply wiped his hands with a cloth and closed the emergency kit. Told you, he said quietly. She'd be fine. Clara stared at him,
overwhelmed and grateful in a way she didn't know how to express. Actually, you fixed it. Marcus shrugged. I told you I could. She shook her head. No, you didn't tell me. You proved it. And for the first time Clara Vance, the woman who trusted no one, especially not strangers, looked at Marcus Reed with full unfiltered respect. The car wasn't the only thing he had repaired tonight. Something inside Clara had shifted too, and Marcus felt it. The Nebula Phantom purred like it had never made a complaint in its life, the engine humming with a quiet confidence that felt almost unfair after the chaos of the last hour. Clara stood beside the open door, still processing the fact that a homeless man had just outperformed the entire automotive emergency support division. Not patched, not band-aided, restored. Marcus stepped back from the hood, dusting his hands casually, as if he'd just fixed a leaky faucet, not resurrected a quantum-cooled hypercar, worth more than everything in Solis District combined. The guards watched him differently now, less suspicion, more awe, sprinkled with the kind of embarrassment that sticks to you when you realize you misjudged someone that badly. Clara cleared her throat, trying to sound like she wasn't internally screaming with relief. So, what do I owe you? Marcus blinked once. Owe me, nothing. You're good. No, Clara said firmly. You saved a $4 million engine. Let's not pretend that deserves pocket change. Marcus gave her that easy half smile again, the one that made it impossible to tell if he was joking or just refusing flattery. I didn't do it for money. Then why? Clara asked, genuinely wanting to know. He shrugged. Because I could. Because it was going to fail. Because nobody else was listening. Something in her chest tightened. That line stung in a way she didn't expect. Because it wasn't about the car anymore. Before she could respond, the guard who'd fetched the pencil approached awkwardly, clearing his throat. Mr. Reed, look, I'm sorry. We weren't exactly polite. Marcus lifted a hand dismissively. You were doing your job. The guard nodded slowly, clearly relieved by the grace he didn't deserve. Clara watched the exchange with an emotion she didn't enjoy identifying. Shame. Not because she doubted Marcus. Doubt was natural. It was the ease with which she dismissed him that now gnawed at her. Marcus, she said, voice softer, what you did, I've never seen anything like it. He smirked lightly. Most people don't hang around quantum engines long enough to watch one implode. She laughed, a small genuine sound she hadn't expected to hear from herself today. Then without thinking too hard, she said, come with me. Marcus blinked. Come with you. Where? To my office. Clara said, I meant what I said earlier. I have a meeting in less than an hour. Investors, quantum thermal system pitch. And after what you just did out here, I'd like you there. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You want me to walk into a boardroom like this? He gestured to his clothes, the frayed sleeves, the hoodie spotted with coolant dust, the shoes that had walked more pavement than carpet in years. Clara opened her mouth to argue, then looked at him properly, and realized how absurd that expectation was. She shook her head. No, you're right, that won't do. She reached for her phone. I'll call ahead. We'll get you cleaned up, dressed properly. Clara. Marcus interrupted gently. That's a nice idea, but I don't think your investors are looking for a charity case to stroll into their meeting. Clara's spine straightened. I'm not bringing in a charity case. I'm bringing in the man who saved my company's most advanced engine with a pencil and an emergency kit. The guards exchanged glances, half admiration, half disbelief that this was actually happening. Marcus hesitated, deeply. She could see him weighing years of disappointment, humiliation, and systems designed to keep people like him out. And then softly, she watched something shift, just barely, like a door cracking open inside him that he didn't trust but couldn't fully close. All right, he murmured, but only because you sound way too confident for me to say no. Good, Clara said. Let's go. She escorted him into the security booth first. It wasn't glamorous, but it was private and connected to the secure network. A staff member rushed to get the hygiene kit, towels, warm water, basic grooming tools. Clara gave the order quickly, without hesitation, exactly the way she ordered multi-million-dollar decisions. When Marcus stepped into the restroom, the young guard at the booth whispered to Clara, "Ma'am, you trust him?" Clara answered without thinking, I trust what he's capable of. The transformation wasn't dramatic, no movie magic makeover. Just a hot shower, a borrowed razor, fresh clothes she had someone fetch from a nearby boutique, a charcoal suit that fit better than it had any right to on a man who hadn't owned a closet in years. When Marcus stepped out, people stopped moving. Even the guards straightened. He didn't look wealthy. He didn't look polished. He looked legitimate, like a man the world should have recognized from the beginning. Clara's eyebrows lifted a fraction, unable to hide her reaction. You clean up nicely. Marcus tugged the sleeve of the jacket, half amused, half uncomfortable. Feels weird. You'll get used to it, Clara said, then softened. Or not. Either way it's temporary. You're here because of your mind, not your wardrobe. As they walked to the car, Clara noticed something she hadn't seen before. People stepping out of their own assumptions. The guards who dismissed him earlier now nodded respectfully. Even the bystanders who had filmed for entertainment looked away, embarrassed at how quickly they had misread him. Marcus felt the shift too, and Clara saw it in the way his shoulders tensed, like he wasn't used to being seen, really seen, without suspicion attached. Inside the Nebula Phantom, the engine quiet under them, Clara drove toward Vance Dynamics headquarters. The city outside blurred past in lights and steel. Marcus stared out the window quietly, absorbing a world he used to belong to but hadn't touched in years. After a long stretch of silence, Clara asked, How long has it been since you were in an office like this? Marcus let out a breath, half a laugh, half a confession. Feels like a lifetime. She watched him from the corner of her eye. Do you want back in? Marcus didn't answer right away. His fingers tapped unconsciously against his knee, like they were remembering blueprints only he knew. I want, he began, then shook his head. I want a chance to matter again. Clara nodded. Then this is the right place to start. When they pulled into the Vance Dynamics garage, security approached immediately, but Clara shut down every question with a single sentence that carried more weight than any badge they wore. He's with me. She led him through the entrance lobby, polished marble, mirrored columns, biometric scanners humming softly. Employees turned to look, confused. Clara Vance bringing in anyone unannounced was unheard of. Bringing in a man no one recognized. Impossible. Marcus felt every stare like a spotlight, but Clara walked with purpose, and he followed her cadence. She guided him into the executive floor lounge. This is where you finish getting ready. The meeting starts in 20 minutes. I'll have my CTO bring you the current deck. Marcus looked at her as if trying to read her intentions. Why me though? You don't know me. Clara crossed her arms, not defensive but certain. Because if you could diagnose a tertiary quantum chamber from sound alone, you can see flaws my top engineers miss. Because you've lived with systems your whole life, even when people ignored your warnings. She paused, her voice steadier than before. And because someone finally should give you a chance that isn't wrapped in politics. For the first time since the morning began, Marcus seemed genuinely caught off guard. He nodded slowly. Clara stepped back toward the door. I'll send Sophia, our CTO. She's brilliant. She'll want to hear what you have to say. Before she left she added one last thing, softer than she intended. And Marcus, thank you for saving my car. But more than that, thank you for proving I was wrong. Marcus didn't smile, not fully, but his eyes changed. Something warm passed through them. A recognition maybe. A tiny bit of healing. Guess we're both getting something fixed today, he murmured. Clara let out a breath that felt lighter than anything she'd felt in years. Then she left him in the quiet room, and Marcus stood alone, staring at his reflection in the glass, clean, dressed, respected, invited, not as a ghost of who he used to be, but as someone who might, just might, be stepping back into the world that had forgotten him. Marcus stood alone in the executive lounge, staring at the glass walls reflecting a version of himself he didn't quite recognize. Clean suit, trimmed beard, fresh hairline. He didn't look like the man who slept behind a machine shop. He didn't even look like the engineer he used to be. He looked like someone paused between two lives, one he barely survived, and one he wasn't sure he deserved to step into. Before he could spiral into that thought, the door slid open. A woman in her 50s, sharp eyes, silver hair tied back with almost military precision, stepped in. She carried a tablet tucked against her side, and moved like someone who had no time for mediocrity. "Marcus Reed," she said, as if she'd been waiting her whole life to confirm the name. "I'm Sophia Reyes, CTO." Marcus nodded respectfully. "Nice to meet you." "No," she said with a small, almost approving smirk. "The pleasure's mine. Clara told me you saved her engine on the street with a pencil." He shrugged lightly. "Graphite's graphite." Sophia blinked. "Good. I was hoping that wasn't exaggerated." She handed him the tablet. "Here's the deck. Investor meeting starts in 10. They're expecting the largest update we've given in 2 years, and because Clara apparently has no patience for conventional timelines, she wants your eyes on it first." Marcus raised the tablet slightly. "Fast review. Think you can do it?" Sophia asked. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, testing her tone, her intent. People had asked him that question before, but always with skepticism. Sophia's voice carried none. She was asking honestly. "Yeah," he said simply, "I can."
He tapped through the slides. The schematics appeared, complex, layered thermal models designed for quantum computing arrays. The moment the diagrams loaded, something in Marcus lit up. His shoulders straightened, his eyes sharpened. He didn't just read the slides, he dissected them. Sophia watched him, arms crossed. She wasn't evaluating him like a threat or a burden, she was evaluating him like a peer. After 2 minutes, Marcus lowered the tablet. "There's a flaw." Sophia cracked the smallest grin. "Of course there is. Show me." He pulled up the internal diagram, pointing to a faint heat channel divergence. "Your heat sinks are feeding into the modulation grid too irregularly. A few hours under full load and you'll get a thermal flutter that forces an early shutdown." Sophia inhaled. "We suspected drift, but this is more precise than anything my team mapped." Marcus nodded. "The modulator bracket's too rigid, you need a multi-stage absorbance layer." "You mean exactly what you invented for the aerospace prototypes 5 years ago." Sophia raised a brow knowingly. Marcus hesitated, then nodded again. "Something like that." Sophia's voice softened. "You know you're brilliant, right?" Marcus looked at the floor. "I used to." She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Instead she gestured toward the door. "Come on. Let's go show them what you see." The investor room wasn't a room, it was an arena. Floor-to-ceiling LED displays, a sweeping glass window overlooking the skyline, a long conference table that probably cost more than Marcus's entire life savings before and after homelessness combined. 12 investors sat across from Clara, suits tailored, watches gleaming, expressions sharp. These weren't people who wasted time. These were people who could move entire industries with a single uncomfortable frown. Clara looked strangely calm, though Marcus could see the tension locked in her shoulders. When she spotted him entering with Sophia, something in her expression shifted. Not relief, not pride, something deeper, something like confidence finally returning home. "Ladies and gentlemen," Clara said, "before we begin there's someone you need to meet." All eyes drifted toward Marcus. "This is Marcus Reed," Clara continued. "He'll be reviewing the new thermal regulation system alongside us today." The investors exchanged skeptic glances. One man leaned back, unimpressed. "And he is someone uniquely qualified," Clara replied. Another investor smirked. "Miss Vance, we weren't aware you were hiring new consultants." "He's not hired," Clara said. "He's here because he understands this diagram better than anyone in the room." Marcus felt those words hit harder than he expected. Sophia stepped forward. "Let's begin." The screens flickered on, showcasing the new system architecture. Sophia started the presentation, crisp and professional. Marcus watched the investors nod along, predictably cautious. Then came the moment Clara had planned. "Marcus," she said, "you mentioned an inconsistency. Would you walk us through it?" The investors stiffened. Some eyebrows shot up, others narrowed. Sophia handed Marcus a digital pen. He stepped toward the screen, aware of 12 sets of eyes waiting for him to fail. He'd faced that gaze before, in conference rooms, in labs, in corporate hallways that reeked of politics. But something about today felt different. Maybe it was Clara's presence. Maybe Sophia's. Maybe this was simply a moment he'd been waiting for without knowing it. He zoomed into the heat channel diagram and tapped a specific section. "This area," he said clearly, "is your problem." A few investors exchanged confused looks. Marcus continued, "Your modulation grid is too rigid. You'll get thermal drift within the first few hours of operation. The system will lose efficiency by as much as 30%. 30%. Those words lit the room with a new kind of alertness. One investor leaned forward sharply. "And you're certain?" Marcus pointed again. "The signatures don't lie. Here, here and here. Heat buildup. The grid can't absorb fluctuations." Another investor crossed his arms. "Do you have a proposed solution?" Marcus nodded. "Yes." He tapped a blank space on the screen and began sketching. The lines were fast, fluid, almost instinctive. A multi-layer absorbance bracket formed piece by piece, merging seamlessly with the existing grid. When he finished, silence filled the room. Not skepticism, awe. Sophia stepped closer to the screen, analyzing. "This reduces drift by over 30%, she said quietly, "and it cuts our manufacturing cost by 40%. Marcus finished. "If you streamline the alloy mix," one investor nearly choked. 40. Another whispered, "We beat Ion Core's entire product line with that." A third investor finally broke the silence. "Who exactly did you say this man is?" Clara answered gently, but with absolute authority. "The person who designed the original thermal architecture your systems are built on." The investors looked at each other, startled. Marcus froze. It wasn't the truth that stunned him. It was the fact that Clara said it like it mattered, like it was something to take pride in, not something to hide behind corporate walls. One of the older investors, a man whose voice carried weight even when quiet, leaned forward. "Mr. Reed, would you consider consulting for us?" "Starting immediately." Marcus blinked. Clara stepped in. "He'll consider it after we review the terms properly." Marcus glanced at her, surprised. She didn't want him exploited. She wanted him valued. Sophia cleared her throat. "And if we're being honest, he shouldn't be a consultant." Every investor turned toward her. "He should be leading the project," Sophia said. "His insights put us 3 years ahead, minimum." Marcus stared at her, stunned. Clara's expression softened with something close to pride. Not pride in herself, pride in him. One investor finally spoke. "We're prepared to fund the expansion immediately, Miss Vance." "Good," Clara said. "Then let's make this official." She turned to Marcus. After the meeting she whispered, so only he could hear, "We need to talk about something bigger." Marcus swallowed hard. "Bigger than this?" "Yes," Clara said. "Much bigger." In that moment, standing in front of investors who had doubted him, beside a woman who refused to let him shrink, and a CTO who recognized him as an equal, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt like he was stepping back into the world. And this time he wasn't stepping alone. The meeting ended with applause. Real applause, not corporate politeness. Investors stood, shook hands vigorously, some even patting Marcus on the back like he'd been part of their team for years. His diagram remained displayed across the entire digital wall, frozen in bright blue lines like a signature left on the skyline. But Marcus didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. He felt suspended. Like something inside him was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Good things didn't stay. Good things didn't choose him. Clara approached him after the last investor left, closing the glass doors behind them with a soft click. The noise of the office faded. Just the two of them remained in the giant conference room, the city glowing through the windows like a promise he didn't trust yet. "You did incredible," Clara said. A statement, not a compliment. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. "They were surprisingly receptive." "They weren't surprised," Clara corrected. "They were impressed. There's a difference." He gave her a faint smile, still trying to get used to that. Clara leaned on the table. "Marcus, what you did, the engine, the diagram, everything, you're operating at a level companies spend years trying to recruit. And you've been doing it with no support, no lab, no stability." She exhaled softly. "It shouldn't have been like that." Marcus tilted his head, studying her. "Why do you care?" She didn't flinch. "Because someone should have, and because I see what you're capable of when the world gives you nothing." He opened his mouth, but Clara wasn't done. "And because I want to help change that, not just for you but for people like you." Marcus froze. She stepped closer, just enough for him to feel the weight of what she was about to say. "I don't want to hire you as a consultant, Marcus," she said. "I want you as a partner." He blinked. "Partner in what?" Clara reached into her tablet, swiped to a set of diagrams, business outlines, and empty floor plan sketches. A new division, she said. A joint project between Vance Dynamics and you. Marcus stared, she continued, her voice calm but full of intention. A place built around restoring talent. The kind of place that sees people the system throws away. The kind of place that looks at potential before appearance. Something in his chest tightened, unfamiliar and overwhelming. Clara's gaze didn't waver. A center for innovation and recovery. Not charity, not pity. A space designed to give people the resources to stand again. Engineers, thinkers, makers, people like the ones you teach at the shelter. Marcus blinked. He hadn't expected this, not in any version of his imagination. And Clara added quietly, you would lead it. He laughed softly, a sound halfway to disbelief. Lead it? Clara, I haven't led anything in years. You led an engine back from the dead today, she countered. You led a room full of investors toward a system they couldn't see. And you led yourself through hell and somehow came out with your brilliance intact. Her voice softened. Tell me who else could do that. He swallowed, hard, his throat suddenly dry. I'm just trying to get my life back, he whispered. I'm offering you a future, Clara replied. A real one. For a long moment, he said nothing. The conference room hummed quietly, screens dimming, city lights reflecting off polished surfaces like shimmering mosaics. Finally Marcus opened his backpack. It was old, frayed, the zipper uneven. Inside were crumpled newspapers, rolled pages, napkins, backs of flyers, each covered with neatly drawn schematics, equations, pressure models, prototypes sketched in ink, he probably borrowed from library desks. He spread them across the table. Clara stared. Some showed cooling systems unlike anything in the market. Some showed modular engines with impossible efficiency rates. Some sketches didn't even look like they belonged to current technology. These weren't the drawings of a man waiting for help. These were the blueprints of someone who never stopped thinking, even when the world stopped thinking of him. How long have you been working on these? Clara asked quietly. 3 years, he said. Maybe more. I lose track. You did all of this while homeless. Marcus nodded. Ideas don't stop because life does. Clara ran her fingers gently over one blueprint, the respect in her eyes unmistakable. These are revolutionary. Some of these designs, they're beyond anything in development right now. Marcus shrugged softly. Had a lot of time to think. You didn't just survive, she murmured. You evolved. He looked at her, vulnerability flashing through his eyes. These don't matter if nobody ever sees them. They will, Clara said. They will now. Marcus felt the weight of her words settle in deeper than any praise. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't awe. It was recognition. Real recognition. Clara exhaled. Marcus, I want these, your ideas, your vision at the heart of the new center. Not as decoration, as foundation. He hesitated. And what do you get out of this? Clara's answer was softer than he expected. I get to build something that matters. The room went quiet. She extended her hand, slow, not forcing, not assuming. You don't owe me anything, Marcus, but I believe in what you can create, and I want to build it with you. He stared at her hand. He thought of Novatech. He thought of the shelter. He thought of the years he spent invisible. He thought of the engine that hissed like it was begging someone to listen. And he thought of the room full of people today who finally did. Slowly, almost cautiously, Marcus shook her hand. All right, he whispered. Let's build something. Clara smiled, not a polished CEO smile, not a PR smile, a real one, one that understood what this handshake meant. Good, she said. Then we start tomorrow. But Marcus shook his head gently. Not tomorrow. Clara tensed. You're backing out. He smiled faintly. No, I need to do something first. Later that evening, Marcus walked through Solis District, the same cracked pavement, same flickering streetlights, same city hum that had been his home when he had nowhere else to go. He approached the shelter where he volunteered, where he taught kids about circuits using cardboard and bottle caps. A boy he'd taught last week, smudged cheeks, bright eyes, was sitting on the curb building something from scraps. Marcus knelt beside him. Hey champ, what you building? The boy grinned shyly. A robot, but it doesn't work yet. Marcus reached into his pocket and placed a small card in the boy's hand. A simple card, no fancy logo yet, just an address, and 2 words, Innovation Center. The boy looked up. What's this? Marcus smiled. A place you come when you feel like nobody sees you. I'll be there. The boy's eyes widened with hope.
Marcus stood, looked at the street one more time, and whispered to himself, "No one gets left behind again." He walked away with the city lights reflecting in his eyes, not like a man leaving the past, but like a man walking into a future he was finally allowed to build.